The movie starts in Philadelphia. Police officer Ramirez grows up believing his mother's stories about the devil. She tells him that the devil walks the earth looking for sinful people to punish. He captures his victims and pretends to be one of them, torturing them and turning them against each other before taking their souls. Ramirez remembers that his mother's stories always begin with someone committing suicide and end with the deaths of all those trapped. Meanwhile, Detective Bowden is eating at a diner with his friend Henry. They talk about forgiveness. Henry says that Bowden's ability to forgive will shape his life, but Bowden believes he can't forgive the man who killed his family. Then, Bowden's partner, Detective Markowitz, calls him to check out a crime scene. Bowden notices water on the ground and no glass, which leads him to think that a truck rolled from the skyscraper across the street where someone jumped. They rush to the building to investigate. Inside the building, Sarah walks in without signing the logbook. The temporary guard, Larson, tells her she needs to log in. He then says to his partner that he has to take papers to the 39th floor. Larson takes the elevator with a salesman named Vince, an elderly woman named Jane, Sarah, and a mechanic named Tony. Vince stares at Sarah and Jane looks at him with disgust. Suddenly, the elevator gets stuck and they all feel frustrated. CCTV operators Lustig and Ramirez notice what's happening and report it to the repairman, Dwight, who is fixing a broken window. Dwight asks Lustig if elevator 6 is really broken. When Lustig confirms it, Dwight goes downstairs to help. Eventually, Lustig calls to say the repairman is fixing the elevator. But they struggle to talk since they can hear Lustig, but he can't hear them. Upset, Larson borrows Sarah's phone to call his partner and let him know he won't be back soon, but he can't get a signal. The lack of service in the elevator makes everyone even angrier. Hoping to diffuse the tension, Lustig plays some music for the stranded people, to which Vince happily sings along. But he only annoys the others, so Sarah suggests that they all keep quiet. On the other hand, Bowden and Markowitz find a janitor sweeping shattered glass outside a building. Bowden then tells him to stop cleaning the mess since it's a crime scene. As he looks up, he notices a big piece of broken glass falling and pushes his partner out of the way before he gets hit. Back in the elevator, Vince proceeds to annoy everyone as he reads everything he can see inside. Then, Lustig calls to inform them they'll try restarting the power, and as soon as the lights go off, Larson panics and holds on to Jane. When the power returns, the elderly woman snaps at Larson and tells him not to touch her, prompting the guard to reveal that he's claustrophobic. Feeling sorry for Larson, Tony opens the escape hatch to let some air in, which the guard deeply appreciates. Meanwhile, Dwight decides to check the basement when Lustig tells him that restarting the power didn't work. A few minutes later, Lustig tells the people in the elevator that they're still working on the problem. On the other hand, Vince urges Jane to buy a mattress from his company, telling the elderly woman that she doesn't have to be as rich as Sarah to buy one. He also brags that he can tell from people's clothing how well off they are, and as he talks, the elevator music plays again. Sarah then gets startled when Vince grabs her from behind, and although the salesman denies doing anything, she warns him never to touch her again. All of a sudden, the lights start flickering, prompting Lustig to tell Dwight about it. Dwight then replies that he's in the basement, and that nothing's wrong with the elevator, adding that he isn't the one turning off the lights there. Running out of options, Dwight tells Lustig he'll just return to the roof, climb down, and restart the car manually. The CCTV operators then continue to watch the passengers as the lights flicker in the elevator, and Ramirez gets confused when he momentarily sees a face on the screen. Back in elevator 6, the flickering lights continue to frustrate the 5 passengers. Then the lights completely go out, and when they turn back on, Sarah finds herself sprawled on the floor, and that's when she realizes that she has a bite wound on her back, deep enough that it's bleeding. Enraged, Tony shouts at the CCTV operators to turn off the music, even though they can't hear him. The passengers have no idea what's happened to Sarah, and when Larson notices the blood on Vince's suit that he's trying to hide, they all start thinking he attacked the young woman. Because of that, Tony suggests that they frisk him to see if he's concealing a serrated blade, but Vince refuses and insists Sarah fell into him. Curious, Lustig asks Sarah to show them her wound, and when she does, he finally decides to call the cops. Outside, Bowden bids forensic scene investigator Elsa goodbye after being called to respond inside the building. Meanwhile, Ramirez rewinds the footage from the elevator and shows Lustig the face he saw earlier. Lustig tells him not to make a big deal out of it. Back in the elevator, Larson and Tony desperately try to open the doors, which isn't much help. They also make sure to watch Vince, as they don't want him doing anything else. When Bowden and Markowitz finally arrive, Lustig explains to him that one of the passengers is suspected of assaulting the young woman. Bowden then assures the passengers that they're doing everything they can to get them out before asking Ramirez to call the elevator company and have them send someone in. Bowden also instructs Markowitz to send in the fire department. On the other hand, Ramirez asks Lustig to tell the detective about the face they've seen, but Lustig ignores him. To identify the passengers, Bowden instructs them to show their IDs to the camera. Unfortunately, Bowden finds it hard to read the letters on the screen, and when he asks if they have a pen, the people in the elevator say they don't. With no other choice, Bowden uses the logbook in the lobby to find out which of the visitors didn't show up for their appointment. Meanwhile, Sarah becomes so worked up that she hallucinates everyone in the elevator is dead. Then, the lights go out again while the mirror behind Sarah shatters, and when the lights turn back on, they find Vince stabbed in the neck with a shard of mirror. Horrified, Ramirez quickly calls Bowden, Markowitz, and Lustig back to their office, where Bowden decides to call for backup. Unable to keep quiet any longer, Ramirez tells them that whenever things go wrong, it means the devil is near. He then urges Bowden to consider the possibility that one of the passengers is the devil, but the detective pays him no mind and tells him to get his head in the game. Instead, Bowden and Markowitz rewind the elevator footage to find out who attacked Vince, and as Bowden notices that Larson is the one nearest to the victim, Markowitz tells him that the guard has multiple records of assault. At the same time, the fire department finally arrives to rescue the stranded passengers. Determined to solve the case, Bowden examines the salesman's body through the camera and notices a paper in his suit. He asks a volunteer to show it to the camera, revealing the salesman's name as Vince McCormick, who has an appointment on the 35th floor. Meanwhile, the passengers learn that Tony used to be a soldier. Meanwhile, the firefighters start working on opening elevator 6. Inside, Tony uses the escape hatch to look for a way out, but his intention to help scares his fellow passengers into thinking he's trying to escape. Larson then pulls him down and angrily tells him they all need to stay inside until they are rescued. After some time, Bowden finally returns to the control room and instructs Markowitz to find out which of the passengers is on Vince's list. Ramirez then shows him the devil's face in the footage and says everybody believes in him a little bit, but the detective thinks otherwise. To prove his point, Bowden shows Ramirez the apology note on the back of a car wash coupon that was left at the hit-and-run site by the person who killed his wife and son 5 years ago. Bowden also adds that they don't need the devil and states that people are bad enough by themselves. Bowden then notices recorded footage that shows Sarah was just pretending to be grabbed by Vince. While on the live feed, he sees the passengers frisking one another. Instead of leaving the passengers to their business, Bowden orders them to keep their hands off each other. Unfortunately, the people inside the elevator continue to distrust one another, and Jane even tries to pepper spray Larson after feeling threatened by him. Meanwhile, in the shaft, Dwight's attempt to help the passengers turns into a disaster when his harness snaps, sending him falling to his death. The elevator passengers are startled when they hear a crashing sound from the ceiling, and as soon as they see the repairman's blood, they realize that something is wrong. From the control room, Lustig informs Bowden that Dwight has entered the shaft from the roof. Bowden then goes to the shaft entrance, where he informs Lustig of Dwight's accident. Later, Bowden and his group learn that the young woman is Sarah Caraway, the guard is Benjamin Larson, and the elderly woman is Jane Kowski. Meanwhile, the fire department begins to break through a wall on the 21st floor. Back in the control room, Bowden and the others discover that Jane is a thief after seeing footage of her stealing a woman's wallet. Although he now knows that the elevator consists of a scammer, thief, liar, and criminal. However, as he's about to leave and instruct his men to find the mechanic's bag, the lights inside the elevator start flickering again before finally going out. Ben lights a match but fails to notice the figure beside him, and when the lights turn back on, Jane's dead body hanging from the ceiling with a light cord horrifies everyone. With 2 people killed inside the elevator, Bowden orders Markowitz to shut down the building and bring everyone to the lobby. Larson reluctantly helps Tony take down Jane's body. Tony then tries to close the elderly woman's eyes, but Larson tells him that won't work until they've been dead for a few hours. Downstairs, the detectives finally locate Tony's satchel in the restroom. Back in the control room, Ramirez takes the radio and starts praying in Spanish, unaware that he's just aggravating the passengers. The people in the elevator are becoming more hostile toward one another, and when a fight breaks out between Tony and Larson, Sarah eggs the guard on to kill the mechanic. Luckily, Bowden returns to the control room in time and orders the fighting passengers to stay away from each other. He also instructs them to put their hands on the wall before asking Ramirez how his story ends. Ramirez nonchalantly tells him that everyone will die, but before Bowden can reply, Markowitz arrives and informs him that Sarah has 3 counts of blackmailing rich married men. He also adds that the young woman has an appointment on the 42nd floor with lawyer Wayne Kazan. So Bowden immediately moves to look for the man in the lobby. After finding and asking the lawyer who might want to hurt Sarah, Wayne suggests they investigate her husband. Meanwhile, Lustig turns off the shut-off valve in the basement and informs the fire department to continue their work. However, Lustig sees a bad wire in a puddle of water and decides to remove it using a piece of wood, only to be electrocuted and severely hurt. He then makes his way out of the basement and stumbles into the lobby. In the elevator, Tony starts suspecting Sarah and believes she's stirring things up to make them fight. Back in the lobby, none of the cops or guards notice that the woman from earlier has already made her way inside the building. Bowden then realizes that the young woman's husband owns Caraway Security and quickly returns to the control room, where Ramirez watches the lights in the elevator go on and off. Bowden is certain that Larson is working for Sarah's husband and believes he will kill the young woman, using the other victims as decoys to confuse the authorities. Suddenly, another outage occurs, so Bowden instructs everyone to point their cell phones toward each other. Suddenly, an invisible force grabs the phones from their hands, and when the lights come back on, Larson is dead on the floor. His neck is twisted, leaving Sarah and Tony suspicious of each other. Scared for their lives, the other passengers pick up pieces of broken glass. Bowden tries to calm them down by sharing how he almost drank himself to death months ago. He tells them to put down the glass and take responsibility for their actions, which Sarah and Tony eventually agree to. However, Sarah is secretly hiding another piece of glass in her back pocket. Soon, the elevator goes dark again. Tony shines his phone light on Sarah, who is equally scared. She reaches for the glass in her pocket, but when Tony loses the phone light, they are left in darkness. When the lights come back on, Sarah has a cut on her neck and is struggling to breathe. At that moment, Cheryl arrives and tells Bowden she is Tony's fiancée. She explains that Tony left his tool bag in the restroom because he didn't want to take it to an interview. When Bowden asks for Tony's last name and learns it's Janekowski, he realizes they mistook the elderly woman for someone else. Suddenly, the elderly woman with black eyes stands up and asks Tony if he's ready to admit his mistakes. A flashback shows that Tony was drinking and driving when he crashed into Bowden's wife's car 5 years ago. He watched as Bowden's wife and son died on the road, but instead of calling for help, he ran away. Tony apologizes and realizes he's talking to the devil. He begs her to take him instead of Sarah, but this only angers her, and she makes the elevator drop a few floors. When the elevator stops, Dwight's radio falls inside. As the devil questions Tony, he decides to confess to killing a woman and her son on Bethlehem Pike 5 years ago. He expresses deep remorse, and Bowden, seeing a coupon in his hand, realizes that Tony is responsible for his family's death. Defeated by Tony's apology, the devil decides to leave him alone. When the fire department opens the elevator, Bowden is shocked to find that Jane has vanished and orders his team to search for her. Later, Bowden takes Tony to the police station. In the car, he reveals that it was Tony who killed his family. He has waited years to confront the man who took them from him. But instead of being angry, he forgives Tony. Meanwhile, Ramirez remembers his mother saying that if the devil is real, then God is too. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.